The final Sunday before March Madness marks the final Sunday for the TCAOA basketball blogs. Again, for those of you tuning in for the first time, my name's Tom Barnico. I'm the Director of Basketball Training for the Tri-City Area Officials Association. We've been putting out these vlog posts for the last 13 or 14 weeks now, pretty much once a week for the entire season. And I think we've had some good opportunities for learning. We've had an opportunity to hear feedback from Brent Rice a couple of weeks ago. And before we finish up the vlog post for the season, I wanted to have one last presentation here, one last discussion about just some general tips for officiating. I want to thank Scott Helmka for bringing there is an article on referee.com that I will be linking in the notes of the YouTube video, and you will probably have seen it in the email that I am sending out to alert everyone to the vlog post that it's live. But a really good article on referee.com, and it's really just about officiating in general. It's football, baseball, softball, volleyball, basketball, everything else in between. So what I did is to keep this video to a manageable length. I went through and picked out the 10 tips that spoke to me the most. And some of these are tips. Some of them are just observations or statements of fact, and that I wanted to call to everyone's attention, because one of the things that I would challenge everyone watching this video to think about as we enter into the last week of boys season, in those officials who are lucky enough to have postseason assignments. Regardless, we're getting to the end of the season, and 4 weeks from now, there will be no basketball official working in the state of Michigan, or 5 weeks from now, whatever it figures out to be. But the reality is that we're coming to the end of the 2021-2022 season. And one of the ideas that I would put out there for every official is to think about what you did well this season, what you didn't do as well as you would have liked, and what would you like to do better? What would you like to focus on for next season? Because if you're like me, the 8 months in between March and November, I typically forget what I wasn't doing well the previous season and what I needed to be working on in the upcoming season. So I think it's important for us to, whether it's write a sticky note or, journal or whatever the case may be. But I think it's important to document kind of where you've been and where you want to go next year to make yourself a better official. The other thing too, that we'll talk about a little bit more in a few minutes, is the importance of camps. I know that there's a number of camps around the state of Michigan. We don't really have any set firm dates yet for any of those camps, but Brian Morley puts on a camp, which from my understanding will be at Grand Valley this year. Dustin Crawford puts on a camp, I believe, at Central Michigan, but don't quote me on if that's going to be the final location. For those high school officials who might want to think about college, Mike Conlon puts on a camp. It was at Michigan State for a number of years. It's been at Western Michigan lately. But when we learn about these camps, we will certainly let the association know. But whether you're looking to get better just in high school basketball, or maybe you're looking to take the next step into junior college or whatever the case may be, I've always been a big advocate for camp. I've in specifically with the camps that I mentioned, there is a lot of learning that takes place. There's a lot of resources that are out there, and it gives you an opportunity to not only work through some of the things that you want to improve upon, number one. But number two, with camp, you're always under observation. There's always someone watching your court. There's always an official who's at least a junior college level official on the court observing you. And a lot of times, like I know Mike Conlon's camp, he's pretty regularly bringing in Division I and Division II officials to observe. So from that perspective, I would keep an eye out for an email from either myself or Scott or maybe Bruce as the president of TCAOA to let you know when these camps become available. So again, what I did was I took the top 10 that really stood out to me, but I would recommend reading all 48 tips that are on referee.com because they really do a good job of encapsulating what it means to be an official and what officials can kind of pull from the experience. So with that in mind, number one, you learn how to better express yourself so others understand exactly what you mean. Now, for me, this goes back to something that I've been preaching pretty much since the first vlog video, which is learning how to better express yourself to coaches and to players by using the terminology that's in the rules book and the case book. And you're probably saying to yourself, Tom, you just talked about that last week, and you talked about it 2 weeks prior to that, and you talked about it 4 weeks prior to that. And I talk about it so frequently because I feel like it's one of the most important things that we can do as officials that legitimize the work that we're doing on the court. When a coach, in my experience, when a coach starts to get a little bit out of hand or get a little ahead of themselves, when they start to act out, one of the best ways to calm them down or take them off the ledge is, number one, they're probably outside of their coach's box. So number one, I'm going to walk them back to their coach's box, or at least I'm going to stand somewhere within their coach's box, just onto the floor, to have them come and talk to me so that they're in the coach's box when they're talking to me. Okay. Number two, I find that when you are using the vocabulary of the game of basketball and specifically the rules of basketball, it takes them an extra second or two to process that information. And in that time that it takes them to process, it gives the whole situation a few seconds to just breathe. And again, we're trying to back them off that ledge so that we don't have to either warn them, give them a technical foul, whatever the case may be. I don't know about anyone watching this video, but I certainly don't like giving out technical fouls. I know they're a tool in our belt that we use. There are times where I feel like it makes the situation better, but there's also times where I feel like it makes the situation worse. So for me, I'm always trying to at least give the coach an opportunity to come off that ledge. And my way of doing that is by explaining my call or my no call using the vocabulary that you can find in the basketball rules book or the case book. So this, to me, is what really number one speaks to for me specifically. Now, it might be different for other officials, and that's fine, but that's what officiating has afforded me, is it's learning to better express myself in terms of the rules and regulations. And there's a lot of these 10 tips that have helped me professionally, that if I hadn't been officiating for, 10 years, I don't think that I would have been able to make the strides in my career that I made early on in my career. And now 20 years into officiating, I can say the same thing, because officiating has taught me a lot about conflict management. It's taught me a lot about, using the jargon of your profession in order to get your point across and bring more value to the situation that you're working within. So there's a lot of takeaways that officiating has been able to give me that I'm very thankful for. Number two, and we talked about this a few minutes ago, during the off season, you use vacation time to attend camps and enjoy it. For those of you who are thinking about joining camp or attending a camp and have never been to a camp before, or even if you've been to a camp before and no one's given you much advice on what to expect, Number one, you're going to more than likely be working a lot of games. Number two, going into camp, I would highly recommend being in the best shape possible. Number one, because you are officiating a lot of games. Number two, many times your physical fitness level is what's being observed by assigners who are really going to take your physical fitness into consideration when they are considering whether to add you to staff, what your assignments are going to look like. So don't go into camp with the 20 extra pounds that you put on after the season started. Camp is a good reason to keep yourself in the shape that you're in, that you were able to get in during the season. Another thing that I would recommend for officials going to camp, when I started going to camps, the recommendation for me was don't be a yeah but person, where an observer or a camp director or whoever gives you advice and you disagree with that advice and you immediately have a counter argument for them on the spot. Do not be that person. If you disagree with them in your mind and go about your day. But I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with later on in the camp or later on after the instruction is given, going back to that particular camp director or that particular observer and saying, you said this. Can you help me explain what it is that you meant? Don't tell them that you disagree with them. They might be able to explain it in a different way than they originally did, which gives you more insight into what they're thinking. I'm not saying don't disagree. What I am saying is if you're going to die on a hill, make sure you're dying the right way. And that's by not being confrontational, especially in the moment. Number two, finding a time where they might be sitting by themselves in between games and just pose the question to them like you're looking for clarification. But an official who yeah buts during an entire camp is going to have a very negative review when it comes time for observers to put their heads together with the camp director. And for those people to decide if they want to add that person to their staff or if they want to give them more varsity games or whatever that looks like for the situation. A yeah but person is going to be viewed as someone who is going to cause problems throughout the entire season. So just a piece of advice as you look to attend camps. Number three, at some point you come to understand that officiating is about the journey. Every game counts, so hold on to moments of joy. This really plays into number four for me, which is long after you retire, you will wish you were still officiating. I'm in my late 30s. I, as I mentioned, have been doing this for 20 years. There's never a moment where I don't walk out, or there's never a moment before the game where I'm not walking out onto the floor and I'm not thankful for the opportunity that I get to officiate. Officiating has given me a lot of opportunities that when I was 18 or 19 years old, I never thought I would get. And, I've been able to work at places, stepping onto the Breslin Center floor has been, one of the best experiences of my life. And those moments that officiating gives you, it continues to give them to you over and over and over again, but you have to understand how to appreciate them. And for me, my appreciation comes from the fact that I'm healthy enough that I can step on the floor every night and do something that I tremendously enjoy. A lot of people say, how can you enjoy getting yelled at by coaches or by the players or by people in the stands? And, after a while, I just kind of tune it out, number one. And number two, I always remember that players can't play, coaches can't coach, officials can't officiate without this whole ecosystem running smoothly, right? So if there were no officials, there would be no games. If there were no players, I couldn't officiate. If there were no coaches to coach those players, I couldn't officiate them. So while it's difficult for me sometimes to feel like I'm giving a coach a little bit of extra rope after he or she has been riding me for 2 quarters, 3 quarters, 3.5 quarters, there's always that little voice in the back of my head that says, remember why you're doing this. Remember how much enjoyment you get out of it. Remember that there's a way for you to interact with this coach that, you know, can prevent the worst of the worst from happening. So I am always very grateful and very thankful when another basketball season rolls around and I get the opportunity to officiate, because, you know, it's something that's not going to be around forever. You never know when you're going to have a career-ending injury or, you know, a situation in your life that's going to come up. So every game is good for me, whether it's, you know, at the middle school level or the high school varsity level. Number 5, displaying confidence in your tone of voice and body posture goes a long way to preserving and promoting your credibility. Okay. Just something simple like standing up straight when you're at the table and reporting fouls, walking with your head up instead of looking down at the floor. You know, when you make a call, making a call on the spot that you show everyone in the gym that you have confidence in. And again, you want to remember that no one is at the game to see you as an official. However, at the same time, you can prevent a lot of confrontational situations with coaches or with players, or hearing feedback from people in the stands. A lot of that can be prevented by just showing your confidence, showing good body posture, showing that you feel like you deserve to be out there. And while you know it's about the players and you know somewhat it's about the coaches, that you can still officiate that game effectively and do it in a way where everyone can feel like they're getting a fair game. So next up, let me get my button here. There we go. Number 6, you understand the importance of being a great partner. We have talked about this as well, but you want to be the person that other people want to work with, right? And it's not just when you're on the floor. It's when you're in the locker room before the game. It's in the locker room after the game. It's in the car ride to the game. It's on the car ride home from the game. You want to be a great partner all of the time. And I think a lot of that goes back to just being a respectable person. But there are a number of guys in the association, and I'm sorry, there are a number of people within the association. I don't want to just restrict it to males, because there are some very good female officials that I enjoy working with as well. There's people in the association that I get excited to work with when I see them on my schedule. And the reason is because they are just good people. They are great partners. I know when I'm out on the floor and I make a 50-50 call, and that official is right in front of the coach who is questioning that call, that official isn't going to just throw me under the bus. Okay. They're going to inform the coach that I'm a veteran official. They, as the coach, should be respecting the calls that I make, because I don't make a call to just make a call, and that you, as my partner, trust the calls that I'm making. That's what makes a good partner to me, in my estimation. And again, on top of that, it's the partners that are willing to have the discussion, the tough discussions after the game, saying, you know, that was not our best game. Why was it not our best game? And how can we improve? Maybe not as a crew, because we won't be working together, the 3 of us, for a while, but how can each one of us take a learning opportunity from this game and really turn it into something positive for the rest of the season? Which kind of plays into number 7, putting bad things in the past will become the norm. Look through the windshield, not the rearview mirror. this is something that this is something that's important for newer officials. I remember my first probably 4 or 5 years of officiating, I would make a bad call during the game and I would ruminate on it for the rest of the game. I would think about nothing else, and it would affect the calls that I made throughout the rest of the game. It would affect how I perceived myself, how I carried myself, how I interacted with coaches. And you have to remember that you make a bad call in a game, within 20 to 30 seconds, the ball is back in play. And more than likely, that call is going to be forgotten about. There are some instances where a coach might harbor some bad feelings, or significantly disagrees with a call that you made. But the reality of the situation is you can't let that bother you. You can't do what I did for my first 4 or 5 years, which was take a bad call and let it negatively impact how you were officiating the rest of that game. You have to have tough skin. You have to have a willingness to say, okay, what did I do wrong? And how can I get better in this game so that I don't make that incorrect call again? There's always going to be situations during a game that, an off the wall situation is going to happen. It's going to throw you off, and it might throw you off for the rest of the game. That happens, right? But after about 4 or 5 years, I came to the realization that I'm never going to call a perfect game, number one. Number two, I started to have the confidence in myself that the calls that I were making, I was calling what I was seeing, and I was seeing what I was calling. And if I made a bad call, I needed to own up to it, whether it be just to myself, or in very, very sporadic situations when I knew how the coach was going to take me telling him or her that I made a bad call. I would make it a point to tell the coach. But again, I'm not doing that very frequently. Most of the conversation is going to be inwards with myself, saying, you made a bad call. It happens. You're going to make a bad call in the next game. You might make another bad call in this game, but you can't let it affect how you officiate the rest of the game. So putting things in the rearview mirror and looking through the windshield is important. Number 8, there's no substitution for repetitions. Getting out there and working every chance that you get. There's learning opportunities all the time. Blowout games, close games, varsity games, middle school games, camps in the off season. There's always an opportunity to get better. You have to be willing to get better, though. If you aren't willing to get better, you won't recognize the opportunities that you can have to make yourself better. And that's why I think it's important at the end of the season to go and catalog what you did well and what you didn't do well, because what you didn't do well is some of the things that you can work on during the summer, whether it's camps or watching game film or watching, that's one of the things that I love about March Madness is I can watch game after game, day after day of the top officials in basketball and how they work, what they call, what they're seeing, how do they facilitate the game. Some college officials, I really appreciate them for the work that they do, because they take command of the game without making it about themselves. They adjudicate penalties accurately. They do so in a way that exudes confidence. They handle conflict with coaches who are flying off the handle incredibly well. So I try to look at the positive aspects of those officials who I respect and try to figure out where I stand with what they do well. How do I improve myself to get to the level that they're at with that particular skill set? So even if you can't get on the court with repetitions in terms of just watching basketball, in watching how the officials move about during the game at the highest levels of college basketball. NBA is a little bit different. There's NBA officials have a very difficult task in front of them, because the NBA is very much about entertainment. And so when they are officiating the game, don't get me wrong, NBA officials are legitimate officials. Like I would take any NBA official on my crew at any time. There's no way that I'm saying that NBA officials aren't the best at what they do. However, the way that they facilitate and administrate the game is it's different because there's more entertainment that is associated with the NBA brand. You can still watch the game. You can still pinpoint some areas that NBA officials do well. Now, I wouldn't mimic their mechanics in any way, shape, or form because they're not in the Federation rule book or the mechanics manual for that matter. But there's always an opportunity to watch basketball and not only watch basketball, but pick up on some nuances that maybe you want to improve upon and you watch how other officials do it. Number 9 and number 10 are also very similar. Advancement may come slower than you expect, but better a year too late than a year too soon. And for those newer officials, you won't work varsity right away and frankly shouldn't. COVID has given some newer and younger officials opportunities to work higher level games than newer officials typically do, which I don't think there's anything wrong with that. What I would say to those newer officials or those younger officials is remember that just because you have gotten to maybe the varsity level or maybe the JV level quicker than you would have 20 years ago when I was officiating, you haven't reached the pinnacle. You haven't reached the top of the line. There's so many skill sets that need to be improved on, even for varsity officials, and that willingness to be humble and that willingness to take feedback from others, but also give positive and negative feedback to yourself is incredibly important. So, as you continue to matriculate through your officiating career, it's important to remember that you might not advance as quickly as you like, or if you have advanced quickly, there's still a ton of room for improvement. And I would say that to any official, and any official worth his or her salt is going to say, I'm decent at officiating, but I need to get much better at A, B, C, and D. And those, to me, are the officials that I want to work with, because those are the officials that are always looking to get better, doing whatever they can to get better, no matter how high they're working or what level they're working. So those, again, for me, were the top 10 tips or statements that kind of stood out. I would like to thank everyone for watching these YouTube videos week after week. Hopefully I've gotten some really great feedback from everyone, which I greatly appreciate. I did not think that these videos would be quite as popular, or that people would find them quite as informational as they have. But I've been very blessed to hear the feedback that I've heard about these vlog posts. So I'm glad that people are getting some value out of watching or listening to them week after week. So again, this will be the last blog post for 2021-2022. Good luck to those TCAOA officials who were assigned tournament games. I think at this point, all of the girls' tournament assignments have gone out, and the boys' assignments are up through the districts. From my understanding, the rest of the boys' tournament schedule will be filled out within the next week, more than likely. So good luck to those officials. And if you need anything during the off season, please feel free to get in contact with me at any time. I'm more than happy to help with any assistance that's needed. So thank you again, everyone. And hopefully you have a good end to your season, and we'll see you next year.